Welcome to the Student Ministry Podcast. My name is Steve Cullum, and this is episode 52 of the Student Ministry Podcast. We're going to be talking to Ansley Higginbotham today, a good friend of mine from Download Youth Ministry. Ansley has done a lot of different things in youth ministry over the years. Currently, she is a stay-at-home mom, but she is still contributing in many different ways to the youth ministry community, both through DYM, through speaking engagements, and now in a lot of different ways, considering going to like coaching and all these different things. So a lot of non-traditional youth ministry talk today, but I think it's going to be great, especially in the world that we're living in right now. If you're listening to this after the fact, we recorded this right in the middle of all the coronavirus, the COVID-19 pandemic that's going on around the world right now, and this health crisis. And I think it's gotten a lot of us to think about how we do youth ministry right now, how this thing that we have been doing to reach teenagers for so long, how it is changing. And in a lot of ways, it's been changing for a while. But maybe the current pandemic that's going on in our world is actually causing us to think differently in a lot of ways right now. And not just in student ministry, but also like our entire church. I think a lot of churches are thinking differently about how they are doing ministry because they cannot meet together in a building to do worship services, to do youth group and things like that. So ministry is evolving and changing, and a lot of us, pretty much all of us, are doing ministry from home now. And that's basically what Ansley's been doing for a little while as she cares for other youth pastors and youth workers out there. So we're going to chat a lot about that today. I am so looking forward to what Ansley has to share with you guys today. But before we jump into that, I want to remind you all, if you have been listening to the Student Ministry Podcast for a while now, and if you haven't subscribed, you haven't left us a comment, please do that. That just helps us know what you like, what you don't like. And also, if you have other youth workers that you know who have not heard the Student Ministry Podcast, be sure to share that with others as well. We also want to thank our sponsor for this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast, and that is G-Shades Student Curriculum. G-Shades is a curriculum and teaching strategy, actually, that's focused on helping students see life and everyday situations through the lens of the gospel. A lot of us youth pastors, we do just a few things unintentionally. We don't, like I said, don't intend to do it, but sometimes we do these things unintentionally. Sometimes we only talk about the gospel when we're giving like an altar call or something like that. We teach students to do as Jesus did, but sometimes we forget to teach them to see as Jesus sees. We often give students a fractured picture of the faith by teaching biblical principles and practices without actually tying them down to their gospel foundation. So in an effort to do something different, G-Shades is a curriculum designed to help you produce confident, gospel-focused students who are able to use their gospel lens to navigate the complexities of modern culture. We are in youth ministry professionally, most of us, and when it comes to the gospel, most of us naturally model it to our students, but G-Shade's goal is to help you teach it to your students. So each series has complete message manuscripts, small group leader guides, parent guides, daily Instagram devotionals, games, graphics, slides, and even bumper videos. All this is incredibly important right now while we're in the middle of this pandemic. So you can actually download your free week of G-Shades student curriculum at gshades.org. And when you order anything on there, be sure to use the promo code STUMINPOD, that's STUMINPOD, to receive 5% off your order. We are so grateful for G-Shades for sponsoring this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast. And with all that said, let's jump into this conversation with Ansley Higginbotham. Thanks so much for joining us today, Ansley.
Hi, it's great to be here with you.
Yeah, so we've known each other for a few years, I think, mostly through Download Youth Ministry, and it's been cool to connect. But I'm excited to hear a little more about your story and to actually connect with you and hear what God's been doing over the years in your life today.
Great. Well, I am a stay-at-home mom currently, but I've been in youth ministry for almost 20 years. I am I am a lifetime United Methodist, and I have also worked in a Baptist church setting and an Episcopal church setting. But I started as a part-time youth minister at a United Methodist church, and then became, assistant youth pastor for a really experienced youth pastor, and then started a lead role after that at another church. And I have had to do some moving around because of my husband's his career needs, and so that has been in some ways disappointing because you want to have that longevity, but in other ways it's been great to see what country church youth pastor is like and what suburban youth pastor is like. So that has been really fun for me to see sort of all, a church with a small budget, an affluent church with a giant budget but huge expectations and things like that. So, and then last year I left a job that I absolutely loved for a church that I had worked for on and off through the years, to stay home with my son who really needed me at home. My kids just needed their mom at home and to get through some special needs issues that we were facing. So and since then, I've been very blessed to be able to do some work with Download Youth Ministry, to be able to speak at camps and retreats, to be writing curriculum for G-Shades and DYM, and just, whatever comes my way that I can do. I love getting to serve and getting to use my gifts. So
Cool.
Yeah.
And shout out to G-Shades, who is actually a sponsor for this episode. So you probably didn't know that. So
writing some curriculum for them right now. I wrote some over last summer, and that was a fun experience. So it's great to get that experience and work with people like Mike. He's awesome. So Shout out G-Shades. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. So take us back a little bit. Share a little bit about your story. Feel free to go into as much depth as you can, just about maybe how you became a Christian and your calling into ministry. I'd love to hear what God's done through the years to get you to that point.
Sure. I grew up in a Christian household, and so we went to church. We didn't miss church. We went to church. We went to church for all the things, and I grew up in a fairly traditional United Methodist church. Lucky, I went to the same church my whole life as a child, so I was lucky to go to a church that was traditional, but also very just flexible. It was sometimes, in some ways, it was more of a blended service sometimes. I was in choir and handbells, and I was an acolyte, and I was in my youth ministry. But what was really special about my church was it followed the discipline. And so there was youth on every committee in our church.
Wow. So
in the Methodist church, most churches, to be honest, totally ignore this. But when I was in middle school, I was on the music committee, and then as vice president in high school of my youth group and then president, I was on our church council, and I had a vote, and it was important. And so even in middle and high school, I was involved in the leadership, not only of my youth ministry, but of the church. And then, of course, through being a scripture reader and acolyting and doing choir and things, I was involved in worship leadership. So I really credit my amazing youth pastor and some other awesome leaders that we had, as well as just the leadership of our church that embraced what John Wesley knew a long time ago, which was that we are supposed to involve our young people in the life of the church. Now we look at that as some sort of newfangled thing from Fuller, but really it's what we're supposed to be doing all along.
Right.
So, and then, like most people, I probably didn't go to church. I didn't do campus ministry in college. I always regretted it. I went to Virginia Tech, and so I would go to church most Sundays, And I would look over and see the campus ministry kids that had walked over together, and I would think, I should go to that. And I could even see some other kids from my own home church in the congregation, and we would sort of wave at each other, but they were people I weren't close friends with. And so it's interesting that it was always tugging at me, but I didn't participate. But I did still attend worship, and I would often drag a bunch of my friends to worship. And I'm always reminded that when I invited people to worship, they came, even whose parents didn't take them. And so it really is important to teach young people to invite their friends to church. I was a communications major, and so after college, I was working in the advertising and communications field, and immediately started. Maybe almost right away, my brother had started a youth choir at our home church, and he invited me to help him. And this youth choir was horrible. They were like, it was just, if they're listening now, I'm so sorry, but at the beginning, it was really bad. And people would get up, and when they would start to sing during, when it was their turn to perform or to lead worship, people would get up that he'd never even met before and come up and sing. It was ragtag. And he said, Ansley, I'm going to start singing in parts. So I'd really love for you to come and help, sit with the kids and help them learn their parts. I was like, singing parts? You haven't mastered the melody. What in the world? But I said, okay, whatever. And so from there, I started working with my brother, and we had, he, another leader, and I had an amazing experience with the students. They were incredible. And then that led me to helping lead youth at the church. And then when I got married and my husband and I moved to a small town, we started a business together, and I started, in small towns, there aren't really youth ministers. So I never thought that I would be one. But we were going to a church and said, well, there's no youth ministry here. Well, why isn't there? Why will no one teach their Sunday school class? I'll teach their Sunday school class. So I guess all along I was just feeling called to work with young people because I had such a great experience. So
that's cool.
And I would say, rather than a mountaintop experience, my experience of becoming a Christian was more gradual because I always believed. Not that I never questioned. I certainly did question.
Sure.
But that was more of a process through my growing up. There were several times in my youth ministry, typically when you're away, at a retreat or some sort of committed time away, that I would commit my life or recommit my life. But it never felt like that's where it was starting for me. And as in the United Methodist Church, we're baptized as infants, and we go through confirmation, and then that's a decision that we make to join the church and to commit to basically being an adult believer. And so I had that process, but that really still felt like a step in the process to me when I look back. Yeah. So I do remember, though, as a young adult, deciding that before I met my husband, that I was going to have to commit my whole life, like my choice of partner, the person that I date. Everything was going to have to be about my faith, because otherwise it wasn't going to work. Yeah. I couldn't marry someone that didn't go to church because it meant so much to me. I couldn't. So why date someone who doesn't go to church, who doesn't go with me, or at least find out why this is important to me? So I think that was probably the final step. And then shortly after that, I met my husband, who is a believer and is very supportive of my ministry. So cool. Yeah, I think that was actually something that my youth minister taught me, and I also learned at Bible college too. But very similar story. I grew up in the church, and I look back at that turning point, and I really don't know when it happened because it was so gradual. But I do remember, and this was one of my classes in Bible college helped to point out those milestone kind of moments in your life, and being able to point back to those times where I did take big steps with Christ. Right. So like there's small steps day after day, but there were those points where I was able to take a big step. And I think, those points where you go, okay, I'm all in. This is not just a Sunday thing. Now I'm all in. And now about my future, my spouse, all those different things are moments like that. And it sounds like, along the way, God was also saying, hey,
the next generation's important. The next generation's important, and kind of pointed you that direction as well, it seems like.
Well, it's almost like I was saying, like, you're going to be good at this. You're good at this. You know, why not? Why wouldn't you say yes? To me, it's almost like I've never understood why it's so hard. You know, like, why would nobody want to teach? I would much rather teach the youth Sunday school class than go to the mom's, you know, Bible study. You know, I just don't want to. I was in United Methodist Women. I think it's an amazing organization. But if you gave me the choice, every time I'm going to pick doing youth stuff. And so it was just a desire of my heart and something that I love. And I think as an adult working with those students and watching them really not be that great of singers, a couple of them were great singers, but, you know, as a group, this wasn't an audition group. These are just people who wanted to give it a try, and just seeing the impact that they could make that music could make on them, the impact they could make on one another, and the impact that they could make. I mean, we ended up touring with our little musicals and stuff, and, you know, just to see you don't need necessarily the skill, you just need the heart to reach people. And then just realizing that I had the skill already, you know, and wanting to be as brave as the young people that I am coming in contact with. Because a lot of times, you know, I mean, we were at my husband's Baptist church where he grew up, and we didn't stay there because I couldn't join the church, having been baptized as an infant, and I didn't want to be rebaptized. But we were just sort of there, you know, when we got married and moved here, just sort of going to church with his parents. And I'll never forget some of the students saying, "Can you teach us a discipleship class?" And I guess that's what they called their, you know, they're sort of like, I want to be baptized, or I've been baptized and now I want to take a class. You know, it's sort of, sort of a confirmation experience. Some of their older siblings and people they knew had sort of had that process, and they're like, "Can you teach this for us?" I'm like, kids are asking for discipleship classes and no one is teaching them. That's nuts. And so I got the Being Baptist book, and I said, well, somebody's mom or dad is going to have to come help. Somebody that's actually Baptist needs to be in the class to make sure I'm accurate. But so I learned the whole Being Baptist book, and I taught it to them. And just, you know, there are students who want to grow their faith. And, you know, I just want to be one of those adults that says yes to them. And now when I can't do that, and my kids are 7 and 9, so we're not too far away from me either being back in a role like that or being in a support role as a volunteer in their youth ministry. But just now, if I can't serve youth, I'd like to serve youth workers. And so I'm really grateful that DYM and other organizations, but especially DYM, gives me the opportunities to do that through, you know, I work on their pipeline, just sort of helping review submissions, and they are very encouraging me to write blogs that they think would speak especially to women in ministry. And so while I prefer to serve young people, I'm really being fulfilled by serving youth workers, because we need support. It's hard out there. It
is. I think that's interesting that God does with a lot of us that have been in youth ministry for several years, as all of a sudden I've noticed him turning my heart more to parents and turning my heart more to other youth workers. And I still love hanging out with teenagers, but just all of a sudden my heart has turned a little bit over the years, and it's been a really cool opportunity to take those experiences and run with them. So I'd love for you to, what does ministry look like for you nowadays, Ansley, as you are, you know, not a traditional youth pastor, but you're still doing youth ministry, you're caring for other youth workers and speaking and things like that. So what does youth ministry look like?
Well, a few simple things. You know, I speak at some camps. So the cool thing about not working is that I have been able to do some of the things I've always wanted to do, but never felt like I could do, because youth ministry is an overwhelming amount of work. And youth ministry plus motherhood just feels like an impossible mission. And so I never felt that I could go take off work to go speak at a camp. and things like that. So now I get to do those things. In particular, there is a camp that we run in the Virginia Conference of the United Methodist Church called All God's Children's Camp, and it is a camp for kids with incarcerated parents.
Oh.
And many of them come back year after year, and it's just the whole camp is specifically geared to them. Most of the students come from an urban setting, so just getting to go to summer camp, it's like a sleepaway camp situation with, sleeping in a cabin and, going boating and, zip lining and all that kind of outdoorsy stuff. And every year I feel like someone from that camp has said, come on, Ansley, come teach Bible. You can bring your kids. Like, I really can't bring my kids. No, I can't do that. But now that I'm not working and my kids are older, I said, I could totally do that. That would be so fun. So being able to say yes to opportunities like that has been awesome for me. And then also my kids get to go and be part of the ministry with me, and that's super fun. And then speaking at our local Christian camp in the summer and also in their winter camp has been fun. Some people have started hiring me to do their weekend retreats, and I love that kind of stuff because, you're getting to meet new students, and that's always really fun. And plus, when I was working, I loved having someone else lead my programming so that I could just be with my students. So I love serving in that way. And I've really started, my background is in writing. I was a communications journalism major. So again, something I never had time to do was to write blogs that serve youth workers. I've really enjoyed doing that. And DYM has given me a medium, to publish my blogs. And so that's been really fun. And also just getting to review everyone's content that they're submitting has been super fun for DYM. And I've been, the DYM team has really pushed me to get some content on the in the store. And I've done a couple things, and I need to do more, but I'm not a graphic designer, and I'm really lacking in that area. So Tim Wildsmith and Frank Gill have been helping me put some of my ideas into actual games, and there's a lot more I could be doing there. But I think I'm a little timid about that, I guess.
Gotcha.
I really enjoyed writing curriculum, like we said, for G Shades, and that was a cool experience. And I'm going to be doing a series again for them, I think, that comes out in the summer. So that's the kind of stuff I've been doing. And also, because some folks like you have have given me some opportunities to speak to youth workers on their podcasts and things like that, especially at National Youth Workers Convention. A lot of people started introducing me to women that they felt like didn't have the support that they needed in youth ministry. And so I've been doing some sort of just, I don't know if you call it coaching, maybe, or consulting, as much as just being a friend and an ear and, a cheerleader for some women that just needed someone to help them through their career as a youth worker. Yeah. So I've been doing that with some folks, and I think in my future we'll probably be in coaching. But we'll see. I'm still exploring and navigating, and that's what's so cool about organizations like DYM and cool youth workers like you who give a voice to women in youth ministry is currently my heart is for how hard it is to be a woman in youth ministry, and especially how hard it is to be a mom in youth ministry. Mental load of youth ministry is exponential, as you know, and then add the mental load of motherhood, and it can be suffocating. Then, add in that we probably aren't being paid as much, or, we are more likely to have to move for our husband's jobs. That's not just true for women. That's a lot of men in ministry too have, wives that are breadwinners. But typically for women, those are more prevalent issues. And I really have a heart for just throwing support out there to make sure, that you're asking for what you're worth, and that you're saying no, or you're setting your boundaries, or that you're not feeling guilty or, whatever it is that especially all youth workers, but especially women in ministry are struggling with. I want to be there to help. I want to be the person that I needed. Say, no, Ansley. Yeah. Ask for more money. No, Ansley, you don't have to accept that answer. No, Ansley, you deserve maternity leave, or whatever it is that they need support. I want to be able to be there for them. So I'm really loving that opportunity.
That's really cool. Yeah, there's certain things that I think that I was just blessed with growing up that I just never, for whatever reason, God may put me in certain situations. And I think women in ministry were one of those things that I think for the longest time, I didn't even realize that was an issue. I was like, of course, like there's people leading, and I don't care what skin color they are or what gender they are or whatever, like God just appoints leaders and all that sort of thing. And then it was later in life I realized, wow, like there are a lot of women that are going through some unfortunate stuff, and they need people like yourself who help them advocate on behalf of themselves. And I think that's probably really difficult in ministry, because we do walk this line of trying to be like Jesus and trying to be grace-filled and all that sort of thing, but we do need to advocate for ourselves in a work environment. So how to walk that line, especially as a woman, I think is probably really difficult, and I have no idea what that's like.
Right, and because it makes us feel or seem like complainers, or like we're trying to I had someone say to me one time, like, well, this, is this about a career move for you? And I thought, well, considering that I'm paid less than everyone else on staff, that seems like a really unfair question. Just sort of, would he have said that to a man? I've had a gender bias review that I had to address with a pastor who I don't think wanted to give me a review like that. If he would have really thought about it, I don't think he would have chosen the words and the approach that he chose. And so I just think there are so many issues for every youth worker, and so many things that only youth workers deal with on staff. And then to add being oftentimes the only female programming person or the only female in your area. And like you, I am United Methodist. So, we have lots of female youth workers. Are they less than the men? Definitely. We have female pastors. They're even in the Virginia Conference, which is a leading conference in the United Methodist Church. Our women are paid less than men. Men get better appointments at churches that pay more money. And the sad thing about that is that in our conference, our pastors are appointed. So that would be really easy to rectify if we were brave enough to do it, right? And so, but there have always been women in leadership. So even to meet, and, in the United Methodist Church, we can kind of be in a bubble, because we already collaborate with one another. We're a connectional church. So I always had youth workers to collaborate with at other churches. I didn't really need to branch out into the bigger Christian world. And my last position, I was at a pretty big church with a pretty big youth ministry compared to, many churches in the conference. And I really realized I needed to branch out and learn from other denominations what they were doing, because we could be learning from them, even if theologically we weren't on the same page. Yeah. I still knew they had something to teach me. Sure. And with the support of my pastor, who was great about it, who trusted me theologically to be able to, decipher or glean what I needed to glean, he really allowed me to branch out into, for what United Methodist is a little scary, to non-denominational land and learn. But then that's when I realized, there's all these other women who are excluded from their local youth pastor gatherings because they're female. What? That's nuts to me. And so I'm like, there's a whole world of people out there who are literally still doing that. I knew there were denominations where women couldn't be lead pastors, but it never occurred to me. And that even if you didn't do that in your denomination, that you would exclude a colleague because their church felt differently about that.
Yeah.
That never occurred to me. How naive but that never occurred to me that they would be dealing with things like that. Or going to youth pastor conferences where things would say, you know, this is for the wives, like major conferences where they would be, you know, where their spouses wouldn't be considered, or just things like that, or just, you know, and it's just crazy to me that that was happening. And so I'm really, it's almost like I can't be that big of a help in situations like that because I never faced it. But then when I do look back, well, actually I am, even though I'm in a denomination that affirms women, in many ways I'm still dealing with a lot of the same things, which is sad but true. So anytime I can, even just sometimes just reminding women that they have value. This is what I talked about with dairy, is that, you know, even like I couldn't achieve the longevity that I would like to achieve because of my family situation, but I'm still valuable. And it took me a lot to convince myself that, you know, why would Steve want me on his podcast? I'm just a stay-at-home mom. You know, why would Derry want me on his podcast? You know, I couldn't stay to any of my jobs as long as these other guys on, you know. And so just saying no, but I do have value because there are other women in the same boat and they need to hear from someone like them. And, you know, and maybe my contribution looks different. And maybe it's still important. That's, so thank you that you give a voice to people that aren't, you know, all going down the exact same road in ministry.
Yeah.
Important.
No problem at all. Well, and in all honesty, you have a small youth group there at home that you have the opportunity to pour into the next generation very literally every day, and I am sure that's probably bringing a whole lot of insight as you know, help other youth workers and other people too, as you speak at camps, because you have your own kids that you're trying to help disciple at home too.
Well, and I can speak for parents. To other youth workers, even just, during the whole coronavirus thing, DYM was really trying to just resource youth workers. You know, it was just, we all stopped, all of us sort of on the support team, to say, like, what do people need? Like, let's get them what they need. And oh my gosh, we have these people as a part of DYM, like Anthony Taylor and people like him, that just stop what they're doing and teach other youth workers how to do things. And, oh, you never use Zoom, let me help you. Oh, did you know you could use Sidekick with that? And crazy. And they're all just brilliant, coming out with all this brilliant stuff. And I said, well, hold on a second, guys. I'm about to cry by how much my kids' teachers have sent me. So just don't feel like your parents need you to send something, because they might not want ever to see another email from anyone ever again. Yeah. And they, you know, immediately responded, could you write a blog about that? So in the middle of, you know, just inundating everybody with free resources, they included my blog that said, moms are freaking out, you know, so don't forget that. Just like chill, be yourself. And if you're a mom and you're trying to learn how to use, you know, YouTube Live, and your kids are now homeschooled by you, and your church, you know, you can't even afford to stop working because you're afraid they'll lay you off. You know, I hear you. I see you. I know what you're doing. And this is crazy town. Yeah. And so I'm grateful also to be able to give a voice to those moms who are youth workers, or to be able to give a voice for the parents to other youth workers. And then also just my son, who has ADHD, you know, it's been eye-opening to me to see what his needs are and how to address them. And, you know, I've had to do a lot of self-learning to address his needs, and how remarkable it is to see the tools that counselors give when you put them into practice, how well he does. And so I do see that as maybe something in the future I would like to be helpful to other youth workers in dealing with students with, you know, special needs, or at least from a parent perspective of how we can serve. Because again, it's another thing that we don't understand until, a lot of times I didn't understand ADHD until I was a parent of an ADHD child. You cannot fully understand that, you know, the child is not making those choices on purpose. And youth worker and that kid is on your retreat and they're losing their, control of their body or health or whatever, it's even sometimes now, when someone will post something about how bad their Wednesday night went, I'm like, Wednesday nights are horrible. Most of those kids need to be at home in bed.
Yeah.
Like, if you're dealing with middle schoolers on a Wednesday night, it's basically never going to go any better for you.
Right.
They are tired. Don't give them any more sweets and don't try to wear them out with activities. That's not going to help. And so, so sometimes I do feel like, yes, motherhood does help give a unique voice. And we all have a unique voice, whether if you're single, if you're married, if you have kids, everybody has a unique value to offer. And it doesn't need to look like everyone else. And I don't want collaboration to turn out to be comparison. And I want people to understand that, your students need you. The parents in your group need you. It's okay if you're not a parent. You can learn from your parents, empower your parents then.
Yeah.
And that's what leadership is. And again, we don't always have those things in our first few years. We're sort of grasping at straws and learning as we go. So anytime I can make it easier for someone else from that perspective, it's great too. And yeah, I want to be a good parent. Maybe hopefully one day to a youth pastor. We'll see. We're at a little tiny church right now since I've stopped working, and we're really enjoying it because it is intergenerational. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens when my kids are old enough to be wanting a youth ministry. I've also considered starting one at their school. They have a small private school in our country to start a Christian fellowship at their school. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's cool. I'm taking a note right here because I think this is so important. You don't want collaboration to turn into comparison. I think, I don't know what the state of our country is going to be in by the time that this particular podcast airs, but I think that's so incredibly important in the middle of all this, the collaboration that's happening with the coronavirus stuff and everything, that I've seen like a lot of collaboration happen, which is so amazing, but I can see how it easily can turn into comparison. And your situation is different than mine versus down the road versus across the country, and that's so important to remember.
Yeah, and let's not be afraid to learn. I'm not even working, but I got on the behind the scenes, Mariners thing with Josh and Doug, so I could learn. I don't want to miss out on all the innovation that's happening right now just because I'm not working in a church. And I've been watching some things that other people are doing. But also, if you don't have the capability or the time, first of all, hopefully by the time this airs, we will be, road out of coronavirus, but we may be at this for a while.
Who knows? Yeah.
This may happen to us again. And so I think we have plenty of time to put the things that we've learned into practice. And you can still learn and be inspired and then put that in to practice in your own context. And it might be the smallest little part of what they're doing. It may even be just seeing, that Josh and Doug got nervous, and they were stressed about it, and and they felt like it was a ton of work, even though it should have been less than what they usually do. Yeah. And just that feeling could be enough to learn from that, even if you're just doing a FaceTime with the 5 kids in your small group. But I really think, in my experience, students just want you to know that you love them. Parents need to know that you understand and that you want to be helpful to them. And so, I just really feel like it can be I don't want people to be afraid to learn from other youth workers. So sometimes people just shut themselves off and say, I'm not going to get involved in all that because it's just overwhelming. Try to find out an amount that you can stand so that a group that you can join on Facebook or wherever, a podcast that you really love to listen to, or a handful that you really learn from. And don't shut yourself off because, I became such a much better youth pastor or youth minister, we say, in United Methodist Church. I don't want any UMCers to hear me speaking out of turn, but youth pastors and youth workers, I became so much better when I started learning from others, even though I couldn't do a lot of what they were doing. It didn't look in the end anything like theirs. I learned so much about what was possible. And and I let others do the work for you. I don't have to be a tech wizard, because I can just ask one of my friends. I can just ask Anthony Taylor what to do, and he'll help me. Or, I can just buy something off DYN that looks good already. Or I can just, use something that I saw someone else posted that they got off YouTube or whatever. And it's just, to me, it's so great to be able to take all that in and use it in a way that serves my students, because ultimately it's not about looking good. It's about serving your students. Yep. And so gleaning from all those people and things, what serves your students. And then I really do think having coaches or accountability partners, even if they have to be virtual, and maybe that's something that we're learning from all this. Maybe you'll never have a virtual youth group, but you learn Zoom, and now you can get on a call with other youth workers at same-sex churches. You can get on with other women in youth ministry. You can get on with other people from your denomination around the country. And but I do think you need a group that helps you. You're sort of doing life with them too. Yeah. And I hope that that's what people are getting from everything that's out there, and not feeling like a failure, because gosh, every youth group looks different, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yep. That's for sure. Well, Ansley, it's been great to talk with you. I have one question before we wrap up, and I give you a chance to kind of plug some things. I know you've had several years in youth ministry experience and in different contexts, and now in especially a different context. Are there any other couple tips that you'd like to share with our listeners today? Some stuff that God has taught you over the years. A lot of times I pose this question, and you don't have to answer it this way, but a lot of times I pose it as, if you could go back in time and tell your younger self, here's some things that you would benefit knowing as you head into youth ministry.
For me, I think it would be to stop and advocate for yourself. This is personal to me, and this is what I try to pass on to people I'm working with, is that if I would have known my value, I would have advocated for myself. And if I would have advocated for myself, then there were times when I could have stayed longer. There were times that I could have, overcome some of the challenges to serve better. For instance, whether it be pay, or whether it be just your level of authority, or your level of collaboration professionally with your coworkers, or even the internal struggle of like, well, I'm not good enough to do this, so I can't do both things, so I'm just going to quit, or I'm just going to move to a church where I can do this differently, or whatever. And I've had a few people along the way that said to me, for instance, I was working with someone as a volunteer so I could finish my Princeton certificate because I wasn't working. We had moved, and I thought I had a baby, and I was pregnant, or I was planning to get pregnant, and the man I was working with, his name is Dwayne. He said, well, Ansley, you just need the right situation. And I would say, well, what are the chances that he's like, you just need to be an assistant. And I said, there's no assistant youth workers in our town. Like, what? And then a friend called me to say, hey, I really need an assistant. Are you thinking about going back to work? And I thought, you know what? I should have just said, yes, that sounds fantastic. But I said, you know what? I'm pregnant and I have a 1-year-old. You don't want me. And he said, Ansley, I just need someone who can get the work done. And I know that's you. So let's just, what do you need? I said, well, I need to be paid by the hour, and I need to be part-time, and I need this and this and this. And he was like, okay, let's write it all down, bring it in, let's do it. And I thought, is it really that easy? He knew my value better than I did. And it's not okay. You need to know your value. If you have to sit down and write it out, what makes me valuable? Don't write out all the things that make you, I'm going to need maternity leave, or, I can't be out that many nights a week because I have kids, or, oh, I'm not techie, or whatever it is. Don't write down all that stuff without identifying all the things that make you the most valuable person for your ministry. You can always delegate those other things. You can always recruit volunteers for those other things, but make sure that you know what makes you valuable to your church, and make sure you find a way to advocate that is in love and grace, but also don't sell yourself short for fear of being, too assertive, especially for women. We don't want to come off that way. And frankly, we do need a little assertiveness for the kingdom sometimes. And so, try to find that balance of openness with your leadership that you can really, and I feel like when we value ourselves when we see ourselves the way that God sees us, that's a good thing. That's not bragging or, burying our challenges, but, God sees us, as valuable to the kingdom, and we should see ourselves that way. So
yeah, that's great. That's great. I was actually just reading, I was telling my wife the other day, I've been reading just through the Gospel of Matthew and seeing Jesus's leadership and how he approaches people, and he's so assertive and so just like he knows who he is clearly, but he just like commands that presence and just talks to people in that way. And I was like, how would he be treated in our world today if people just came across that strongly, because you're so certain. And I think people in general, it'd be hard, but I think it's unfortunately really difficult for women to come across that way because of perception.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've had a pastor say, basically I was one of the most talented youth workers they'd ever worked with, but you're too assertive. I was like, well, I'm not sure that, that is really a negative. And also, how can I be both at the same time?
Right.
And also that is a really gender biased word. Let me do some scholarly research on that, because you shouldn't be using that word and, on a review. And so it just, I don't know. It just, I mean, shouldn't we be assertive of what we know to be true? And sometimes women have to push harder, and then sometimes women take twice the heat for pushing harder.
Yeah.
But I feel like when we are confident in what our value is, we don't have to do that in a negative way. Yeah. And there have been times I've done that in a negative way out of frustration. Whereas if I would have sat down, if you have a coach or a partner, someone that you can sit down and say, how am I valuable? Luckily for me, I had a colleague that needed my value. And so he helped me identify what I was good at. And, some other colleagues. And a lot of times that comes from men. And I guess that would be another tip that I have. If you're a man in youth ministry, there are things that you can do to lift up your female colleagues. You can make sure that they're included. You can call out other youth workers for gender bias. Sometimes it seems like snowflake stuff, but sometimes we're pretty fatigued of talking about your beard or, listening to like inappropriate jokes. Most of the time we work with middle schoolers. We can blow that pretty well, right? Okay. But we're sometimes we're just tired. We don't want to hear any more jokes about your privates, or, we don't want to talk about your favorite beard oil anymore. Like we just don't, because that makes us feel not included.
Yeah.
And so some of that you can laugh about, and some of it, it really is that creating an environment where your female colleagues are not welcome. Because sometimes we just want to be made to feel like we're on the same team as you. And when we do that, we provide them opportunities, and I'm working with some men right now who are trying to make sure that, that there is, there are female voices, for instance, on the DYM blog, or that there are female authors in the DYM store. And that takes men reaching out, because they are currently controlling, who's on the blog. So if they don't reach out and find, women, either ones that they know or ask other people for women that they know, if they're not making their voices heard, then there will not be representation. And they know, those are the kind of men that know that we're all better when there are more voices included. So if you're the kind of man who knows that to be true, and most of us when we think about it, we know that's true, right? More diversity in gender, in nationality, cultural experiences, the size of your church, everything is really helpful to youth ministry as a whole. And so if you're the kind of man who has, if you're sort of a gatekeeper, or you have a platform like with your podcast, what are you doing to include more people of color? What are you doing to include more women, to lift up women? Because it's your responsibility. And I'm grateful for the men in my career who have done that, because otherwise, and some of those men don't even agree with me theologically about women in leadership, but they respect people and they want to hear from people that disagree with them. And that's made a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. Ansley, it has been so great to talk with you today. I'm sure that our podcast listeners are going to want to get a hold of you, and they're going to say, how can I learn more? How can I even get coached by her? All that sort of thing. So what is the best way for people to connect with you online?
Well, Ansley Higginbotham is a lot. So that's like a lot of name. But you can find me pretty easily through Twitter and Insta. I'm Ansley Higg. So it's Ansley Higg, Higg. And you can look me up on Facebook. I also have a website. Hopefully by the time this airs, I'm so lame. As you can testify by the fact that I was having a hard time turning off my notifications at the beginning of this. I have a friend who has lost her patience with me that my website needs work. So hopefully by the time this airs, my website is called Ansley Loves Church, because Ansley Higginbotham is just too much. AnsleyLovesChurch.com, and there you can find blogs I've published, hopefully the resources that I have available in the DYM store, how to get in touch with me and things like that. So
cool. Well, thanks so much. And yeah, I'm just I'm thinking about the future for you. I mean, you're doing so much with a non-youth ministry job that I think the rest of us may suffer some if God says it's time to be pulled back into the church, because you're benefiting all those other youth workers and parents and everything in the meantime. So I don't know. I don't know how you're going to balance it all if God does that.
Maybe I'll just feel like I have so much time on my hands when my kids are older, but probably not.
Well, thank you so much for being on today, and may God bless all the different ministries that you're involved in.
Thank you, Steve. You're great. Thank you.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that conversation with Ansley Higginbotham. If you have not yet connected with her online, be sure to do that. She's got a wealth of wisdom and knowledge about youth ministry, and she's great to talk to, as you could tell. But make sure you do contact her and ask her all the questions, because she's got a lot there to share. But also, if you have not yet connected with us on social media, please do that. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and we would love to just connect with you online, hear about recommendations for other youth workers that we should interview in future episodes, and just especially right now, hear about what your ministry is going through, how you're doing ministry in the middle of all this coronavirus stuff. I would love to be able to hear all that stuff and hear what's working, what's not working, that sort of thing. If you have not connected with any sort of network, now is definitely the time to do it. You can join the Download Youth Ministry Facebook group, but there's so many other things out there. A longtime sponsor of ours, the National Network of Youth Ministries, has a great website to connect with other youth workers. Just make sure you're in community right now. I think that's always huge, but especially right now in the middle of all this. We also want to thank our sponsor for this episode of the Student Ministry Podcast, and that is G-Shades Student Curriculum. If you haven't checked out gshades.org yet, be sure to do so to get your free week of curriculum, and also use the promo code STUMINPOD to receive 5% off your order. Thank you once again for tuning in to the Student Ministry Podcast. Thanks for sharing it. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for leaving all your positive comments. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to do this. And I look forward to being here again next month with another interview. We've got some great ones lined up. So tune back in again, share this out with others. And if you have other people that we need to get in contact with, be sure to let us know. We would be so grateful for that. Well, with all that out of the way, it's time for you guys to move back to whatever you've been doing, trying to figure out ministry in this whole coronavirus thing. But know that I'm praying for you all, and may God bless your ministry.